demo is for the biscuit method. So you did the muffin method last week. This week is the biscuit method. So what these methods are is how to put flour mixtures together. Flour mixtures usually use, well, obviously flour, but they are also called quick breads. Okay, so the quick breads are what we're making right now, the cupcakes, the muffins, the cinnamon coffee cake. They all use baking powder or baking soda as their leavener to make it rise, okay? Unlike yeast breads, if you've ever made yeast bread before, it takes a long time for that yeast to push up on that bread. Yeast is a very powerful leavener, okay? So that's okay. With quick breads, we want to make sure we don't over mix. So remember the muffins and the cinnamon coffee cake, we didn't want to mix it too much because these are weak leaveners. They don't lift very strong. So your mixture, your flour mixture has to be very easy to push up. Okay, so we don't want a lot of gluten. We don't want a lot of strong protein in there. All right, same thing with biscuits. But you'll see we have very similar ingredients: flour, salt, baking powder, fat, and liquid. But it's going to make a completely different thing. What? How is that? Okay. Well, it all has to do with how you put it together, the amount of flour to liquid, okay, and the temperature of the oven. There's a lot of factors that make something a cupcake, a muffin, or a biscuit, or a bread. Similar ingredients, but different yummy product. All right. So it's kind of like magic, right? But really, it's just science. Let's start measuring our ingredients first. Like always, we have to be accurate when we're baking. So flour, we're going to sift it first. Okay, next ingredient is whole wheat flour. Remember, we use whole wheat flour to increase the nutrient value. It adds B vitamins to our baked item by adding the bran back in. Okay, so we want and add some fiber, which is always good for us. So we want 65 milliliters. So I'm going to use the 60 measure. Remember, we don't need to sift this one. Your next ingredient is baking powder. I'm going to put that one in here. Oh, remember to put lids back on your containers because we don't want anything flying into your containers. You don't want liquid or anything that's going to contaminate that container. We want to get 2 times 5. Now again, I've got the straight edge, so I'm just going to drag it across there. And that levels off for me. So I highly recommend, if you have a new baking powder, to not open the whole paper and just cut across the middle of it so that you have an automatic leveler. Sometimes these are called baking powder biscuits. Okay, so that's why it's quite a lot of baking powder, so it's going to make our biscuit nice and high. Salt, we want 2 milliliters of salt. And if I look ahead, I realize I need to put all my dry ingredients together. So I think I can put this with my baking powder, right? Yeah, they all go together anyway, so I'll put it in the same container. Our next ingredient is shortening. So shortening, I want to show you a different way of measuring this one, because with biscuits, we want there to be layers of dough, so that when you eat that biscuit, you should be able to open it up and there be nice flaky layers. So another way to describe it is it's flaky. kind of like pie crust. You do the same method for pie crust. So we're going to do something called the water displacement method. Okay, so I've got some water here. If you look at the recipe, it asks for 50 milliliters of shortening or margarine or butter, whatever you have at home. Make sure it's cold. Okay, so I've got my butter in the fridge right now. I haven't even taken it out yet. Okay, usually I'd have everything ready. So that's one I want to keep cold. Okay, so I want 50 of fat, whether it's shortening, butter, or margarine. So if we look up close at this measure, the maximum amount is 250. Oh, there it is over here. So what you would do is take 250 minus the amount of shortening or fat that we need and add water up to that line. Okay, so 250 minus 50 milliliters of fat, butter, shortening, margarine, equals 200 of water. So I've put the water up to the 200 line. I'm gonna go get my butter now. So here's my butter. So what I'm gonna do is take chunks of butter and put it into the water. And when I put that in, what do you think will happen to the water line? Okay. The water line should rise, okay, because I'm putting things into the water. Now you have to be careful that this butter is underneath the water, okay, not just like that. Do you see how that butter's floating? If it's floating, it is not displacing the water. Okay, so let's push that down. I can use my butter knife or my finger and just squish it down to the bottom so it's underneath the water line. Okay, now I'm watching this water line rise up to 250. Okay, so I'm going to keep adding butter until that water line rises to 250. Do you see it's getting close? Yeah, I'm getting close. How does that look? Oh yeah, that's perfect. Okay, so now I know I have 250 milliliters of water, it looks like, and butter. When I pour the water off, I will have 50 milliliters of butter in here, or margarine, or shortening, whatever you're using. Okay? But it needs to be cold. Okay, so make sure you don't take it out. We don't want it soft. Make sure it's cold. This water now we want to pour out. Okay. You don't want to pour your butter out into the sink. So I usually pour it into a bowl or something that you might have handy. So now I have 50 milliliters of cold, hard butter. Milk, we have approximately 100 mils of milk. I did measure 100. You may need a little less or a little more, okay? I'll show you why later. And finally, you can decide what flavor biscuit you want. If you want a savory biscuit, I'm gonna have mine with my soup for dinner tonight. So I'm gonna make cheese biscuits, okay? My kids love cheese, so I've got some grated cheese here. You'll need to grate your own, okay? And remember, when we measure, we don't, I know, these delicious ingredients, people want to do this. Is that 125? No. Okay. At home, you can decide what you want, but a little more cheese isn't going to hurt. If you go double, it's going to be really greasy. Okay. So you can pat that down. It's about 125. Okay. If you want to make a sweet biscuit, like a scone, you can choose to use the other option of raisins and sugar. Or you could try dried cranberries. You could try fresh berries like blueberries, fresh cranberries. So be creative if you want to do sweet ones. Like a blueberry scone is one of my favorites. So let's start with the recipe, okay? Preheating our oven at 400 degrees. It is a hot oven, okay? So check that the oven rack is in the middle position. So now in a medium or large bowl is fine, not a small one, you need space, Okay, we're gonna sift together our flour, baking powder, there's our flour, baking powder and salt, and add our whole wheat flour. You can actually use a fork to stir that with. And now, instead of making a well, we're not making a well in here, we are going to cut the fat into the flour. So I'm on step 3, where it says cut the fat into the dry ingredients with a pastry blender. That is this tool here. If you don't have one of these at home, not a big deal. You're going to use 2 of these, okay? Butter knife. Okay? So how you use that is you would cut across like this. It will be much faster to do it like this. So let's put our butter in. Remember, we've already drained the water out of here. So we're putting the butter in. And you would use that butter knife like this, going across and cutting it into little chunks. Okay, if you do have this tool, it does make it a lot faster. Okay, so I'll show you how this works. You go up and down, and it cuts it into little chunks. You will need to use the butter knife just to scrape it off once in a while. But once it gets smaller, it will be much easier and it will fall right off. Okay, so we've cut it into small pieces. I want to show you what I mean by small peas. So I'll take one of these pieces like that. Okay, it's about a small green pea size. Okay, so we're good to go. Step number 4 is to add our optional ingredients at this point. But we're using cheese, so I'm going to add that at this point. Little options you can add. Sometimes I add a little garlic powder, sometimes I add onion powder, chives, some herbs. So be creative if you like. And add some flavors. Cayenne pepper is a good one. I know it sounds weird, but nice little zip and spice. So toss that around with the cheese. Now, unlike the muffin method, we are not making a well in the middle. We are going to toss this around like you would toss a salad. So you know when you put dressing on a salad, it never tastes good to just dump it all at once. So we don't want to dump all this milk in at once, okay? Because your salad will be soggy all in the middle. So we're going to toss it around gradually. So I'm on step number 5. Add milk gradually, a little at a time, and I'm going to toss like this, lifting up from the bottom, okay? So dribble it in. You may need all of the milk, you may not. We'll have to just take a look. Let's see what it's looking like on the bottom. Still a little bit of dry down there, so we might need it all, it looks like. Used up most of my milk, tiny little dribble in there still, but I can tell now. How you can tell is you can gather it up into a ball, okay, and it all gathers up. So we are on step 6, turning it out onto a lightly floured surface. So you take a little bit of flour. See, I have it just in a container here so that I'm not putting my fingers into the big bucket. Okay. See how it gathers up into a ball now? Okay, so I'm turning that out. Okay, we're going to use the heel of your hand to lightly knead it. Push, fold, turn. Push, fold, turn. That's number 2. Push, fold, turn. And 6. Okay, that's all you need. Okay, so see how it's fairly smooth now? Okay, I'm going to check that it's not stuck on the bottom. Put a little bit more flour. And what we can do is roll this out with a rolling pin. Okay? If you don't have a rolling pin, you can just use your fingers and pat it down. Okay? But rolling pin, you won't melt the fat as much. So don't forget to put a little bit of flour on your rolling pin. Push forward, push back. Push forward, push back. Okay? You want to make it about 2 centimeters thick. So that's a little bit wider than your thumb thickness. Okay? So again, we can just pat this down, or we can use the rolling pin. Forward, back, in the middle first, forward, middle, back. We do not want to go off on the edge like that, because look at how skinny that makes it now. Okay, so we want to push that back. We want to go push, forward, up, back, forward, and back. So you're going to use something to cut them into circles, or you can cut them into squares, okay? Or you can cut them into triangles. I want to show you some I've made before that I just cut into triangles like scones, okay? So these ones I'll show you how to do circles. Okay, you're going to cut with you can cut with a cookie cutter. This is a round cookie cutter, or you can even just use a glass, okay? Whatever you use, you're going to put a little bit of flour on the counter and flour that cutter first. So dip it in the flour so that it doesn't stick to the dough, okay? Now try to make as many as you can. Don't go right in the middle, okay? Go off to the side and get as many as you can. So go straight down and lift up. Scraps, you're going to gather those together gently and just gently put them back into a ball. Don't work it too much, and you're going to roll this little ball out too. Parchment-lined tray, or if you don't have parchment, you just put it right onto the tray. It's fine. Okay, I've got my triangular ones from before, and now I've got my circular ones. You want to leave some space in between them. Okay, so this is 2 recipes here. I'm going to put those ones. Put your fattest ones near the edges. If you have some that are a little bit thinner, put those in towards the middle. Now, if you put these close together, okay, they will have soft sides. If you put them a little bit farther apart, they will have a little bit more browned edges. We're going to pop these into a hot oven, which is a 400 degrees Fahrenheit oven, because we want to blast it with heat to get those layers. Okay? Middle rack for about 10 to 12 minutes. Start with 10, check them. Now, while our biscuits are in the oven, I'm going to show you what to do to clean this up. When you put a cloth on the counter, it's not going to make dough or glue, and you're just moving the dough and glue around. Okay, so push all this flour off first, and then you can give the counter a good wipe. Do not wash a rolling pin, because in here there is metal that can go rusty. So with the rolling pin, you would just scrape off anything. Here they are out of the oven. Remember, we are not looking for brown on top. What you're looking for is brown on the bottom. Okay, so check yours at about 10 minutes. It really depends how big they are. Okay, I want to show you what I mean by the layers. So can you see those layers, the lines there? Okay, and then on this one, the lines. So I want to show you when you open this biscuit up, you should hold the top and the bottom. You should be able to open it up with flaky layers like that. Okay, you can put a little butter on there if you want, or they're just good, just as is. I'm gonna dunk mine in my soup and eat them that way. Oh, I better eat some now. Pretty good.